Hello and welcome. Great to have you back today. As always, I want to say I have a fabulous guest lined up for you. And we talk about a very, very important topic, and that is to do more good. For those of you following me on social media, you may already have seen me post his book, sharing some insights from that conversation, because I find it so tremendously important that each and every one of us keeps thinking about how can I do more good every single day. And today we are going to break through the assumption and perception that doing more good means you have to lead a big initiative in doing more good, or you have to donate a ton of money. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think loads of people could be helped with that, but that's what it isn't necessarily about. And today's conversation, it's fair to say, is really, really humbling. At least it was to me, and I have no doubt it will be to you as well. But what if the secret to doing more was getting a little uncomfortable first, actually? And today's guest, Neil Ghosh is his name, is stepping just outside his comfort zone and straight into your headphones for a conversation that's all heart, wisdom, and spark too. Neil is a social impact strategist, an entrepreneur, and now best-selling author of Do More Good, a book that's already hit #1 in its category on Amazon, and features stories from global icons like the Dalai Lama, alongside everyday heroes doing extraordinary things. And with 3 decades of experience working across more than 50 countries and sectors, from government to grassroots, Neil has built a career around one simple question: how can we do more good together? And here's a twist. For a man who spent most of his life lifting others up, promoting his own book felt awkward first. And you may notice that in this conversation from time to time today, that when we delve a bit deeper, when it is about PRing, quote unquote, him, there's a certain humbleness, a certain discomfort, which I find personally very endearing. And yet he showed up. And not for the spotlight, but for the mission behind it. Because in a time when the world can feel so divided, overwhelming, and downright noisy, Neil believes we need more real stories, more shared hope, and more courageous action. In today's episode, we explore what it really means to lead with purpose, how impact scales when we stop playing it safe, and why vulnerability isn't weakness. It's a gateway to genuine change. So here's the question I want to leave with you before you dive into our conversation. That's again a moment to hit the pause button and have a think. What would you do differently today if you believed that doing more good didn't require you to be perfect, just present? What would you do differently today if you believed that doing more good didn't require you to be perfect, but just present? Well, let's dive in. Let's hear what Neil has got to say about that. Enjoy today's episode. And as always, let us know what you made of it, what you took away, what support you may require. Hello, and a very, very warm welcome to you, Neil. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good to be here.
Oh, you say it's good to be here, and I actually believe that you think it's good to be here. But from our first conversation, I remember you saying, it takes me a little bit out of my comfort zone to do all of these interviews, to be on stage, so to say, in inverted commas. And I appreciate you have done a few of those since, in particular, launching the book in the US. But how are you feeling still about being center of attention?
Right. It's a fair comment. I think the reason I mentioned what I did when we first spoke, if I think about the journey, at least professional, private sector, government, and nonprofit, which I spent quite a bit of time, it was mainly about somebody else, not about my book or my story. It was somebody else's story. The book is still about somebody else's story, but somehow, because I'm the author, it gets a little bit too much attention on me. But I think that's part of the journey I accepted because I believed in the messages. I believe the goal of the book to really inspire action, to motivate people, sparking dialogue. So I think when I think about the reason behind it, I think I'm getting more comfortable. So,
yeah, and you are a tremendous individual, really looking at other people's stories, sharing them to do good in the world and to inspire others by doing good. And yet, and I might be making you feel very uncomfortable now, when I started to do more research around you, your past, your experiences, and while I haven't finished your wonderful book yet, I have definitely started it. I can't help myself but being inspired by you. Taking, the effort and the energy to sharing these stories, to collect them, to make connections, to bring people together and connect them to important causes. And you in this book are, from my perspective, making already such a huge impact in this world, sharing the good and inspiring others to recognize even the smallest moments of being kind, of doing good. And I just want to call that out and say thank you for it. However, in combination with this long intro, I also would like you to share with our listeners what inspired you personally to not only write this book, to collect these stories, but also to share it now with the readers.
Sure, Cathleen. I think I have given some thought, to be honest with you. I think the answer also evolved in my own mind, but I will tell you what I'm thinking now. Definitely one that comes to mind because I was very young when I saw the power of empathy and the power of taking small but conscious action, how that changed somebody else's life. Right. So this is something I have observed as a very young boy. And I talked in the book a little bit, and I think I kind of mentioned a phrase that we had limited resources at home, but unlimited empathy. And one of the phrases I used, I always kind of felt my mother was a 24-hour empathy machine. And she didn't kind of look at who the receiver was. It was never an issue who the recipient might be. So it was kind of, and also not more for someone, less for another person. It was an equal distribution of empathy, which was very unique in my mind. So kind of stuck in my head. And then, of course, growing up in Calcutta, you see, and I've traveled the world, and I can tell you right now, in Calcutta, sometimes poverty can be very close to you. You cannot really run away. So you see it on a daily basis. And that's where I think kind of my upbringing happened, that I kind of felt so many people, not just my mother and my dad, but other people doing things for others. And the power of that stayed with me. And if I fast forward in my professional life, I've traveled in, East Africa, West Africa, Latin America, Asia. I've seen that extension of that empathy, the power of doing good, sometimes very small things. And I wanted to kind of share that. Another thing I think also subconsciously played in my mind, I believe, that many people, and some of them are friends, some of them are colleagues, some of them really people I just met because they knew what I was doing, asked me, what can I do? How can I help? And that brings back to another belief I had that, if you look at the news cycle, doesn't matter what news I watch or you watch, it's a lot about division and disruption and chaos. But I am a strong believer, maybe because how I was raised, maybe because my travel, I believe empathy runs in a regular citizen's life. Empathy is very strong, not just in America, I think every country I travel. So I think my second reason was, if that is there, then I said, okay, let me find a way to inspire that conversation, ignite that power of empathy. And that was kind of one of my big motivation. And what I did in added to that, I said, okay, there must be something of action, not just stories. And that led me to have a resource section at the end of each chapter, that whether you care for environmental issue, or you care for poverty, or you care for trafficking, whatever the issue might be, I have collected, or rather vetted, as many organizations as possible, and I listed them. So you can join them, you can contact them, you can be part of the solution. So I think that those are the couple of ideas came to my mind when I was thinking myself, what are the combination of factors other than some people told me, Neil, you got to write this thing up. So I think it's a combination of factors.
Now, you mentioned empathy, and in your book, you mentioned it whispers to you, or it can be a small whisper. And sometimes there are people around me who even tell me I find it hard to notice empathy, to access it, and therefore to share it with others and whisper to them. And you highlighted also the polarization, the division that we see in society. And I would love to support people in this world, whoever it is, to access their empathy. And I wonder what top tips you would give to people to really tune into it.
Right. One of the things I always say that we have to ask ourselves a question. What is important to me? And there's nothing wrong in that, because we all have different issue we care about. Absolutely. I think it's always good to start with ourselves. What is most important to me right now? And I think that's a good start. And I think I always focus on small action, nothing big. And because people ask me this question, a variety of this question, what he just said, I kind of created a framework. It's not in the book, but I will try to articulate as I'm answering this question more and more, and people talking to me about more and more. And I kind of I give it a name called GEMS, GEMSS. It's easy to remember because I believe we're all gems in a precious stone. So let me explain what do I mean by that. I think the G is for me, get involved in any shape or form. Get involved. And I think I equate that with engage citizenship. Engage citizenship. So get involved in some shape or form, whether you get involved in the community, get involved in a larger scale, wherever you are, get engaged, get involved. I think the E part is empower others. And I talk about mentorship. You can mentor somebody sometime I listed organization in the book that you can join, that you can be part of, you can mentor others. So these are all small steps, right? So getting involved, empower others. The M stands for microphilanthropy. And I explain that in a way that people think, empathy is a soft word. I think it's a strategic word. I think it's empathy is about power. Empathy is about resilience. It's a force. I really see empathy as a force, not something soft. So the third one, I kind of said, how do I bring this out? I said, okay, do some microphilanthropy. When you give 50 cents in a gas station to St. Jude, you are becoming a microphilanthropist. And the last two S, as small as it may sound, showing up. A lot of time in my life, people have showed up for me at a time when I really needed somebody to talk to. So it's not about any big gesture. Just knowing that somebody is there, I think gave me tremendous amount of comfort. And I can tell you stories after stories, not my story, but other people's story that shared with me, how that showing up basically changed their whole attitude towards life. And the last one I say, the last S is coming back to the cycle again, start small. So I think that's I created a framework so people don't feel overwhelmed about how do I show empathy, and accepting empathy not as something soft, but something as a force. And I think one of the words I use, because it's whispers, you also have to tone down the noise, because if it's so loud, I cannot hear it. So one thing I encourage people, you have to sometimes shut down the news, because it's going to be overwhelming. If you're surrounded by so much noise, then what happens is we start living reactively. So I say, so we have to move from reactive living to proactive living, right? So if you're consumed by the negative news or the pain we are feeling, or whatever is our daily issue, we get into the cycle of reactive living. And I say, no, I don't want to live reactive. I want to live proactively. And to live proactively, I do have to tone down the noise and listen to the whisper of empathy. And then some of the action I mentioned, this is the way I at least try to engage myself and show empathy.
You just reminded me of something. Like every other person in this world, at some point we go through change. And I have had a few years of self-inflicted change, self-created change, and figuring out what my purpose is going to be and so on. And my energy wasn't the best. And weirdly enough, in this time that feels like we need more good and more kindness and more empathy in this world, I am, to cut a long story short, back at my best, feeling highly energetic, positive, looking after myself, right? Which helps with energy.
Yep.
I'm getting to the actual point. What's happening here, and I want to build that bridge to what you said, everybody has their own things to look after. That includes yourself. Look after you.
Absolutely.
And looking after you includes, if the news suck the energy and life out of you, reduce how often you watch it, which I have definitely done. And now I feel far more able to give. Yep. In those small moments every single day, to be more present, to listen actively, to be when somebody just needs somebody to sit there and be with them, to offer an additional tip, where I say, they work hard, come on, let's just offer something to them, whatever it is. But I really want to highlight the point you made. You've got to create that space inside of you as well. Because if we remain in this negativity, in this place of negativity, triggered by news, for example, it's going to be hard or harder to access our empathy.
Yep. You need the space. You need the space for yourself. And everybody have a different way of doing it, Kathleen. Some people go for a walk. Some people read a book. Some people listen to music. Whatever your own system might help you to find the space, I find it extremely important. I even go one step farther. Once a year, I go away somewhere for 1 or 2 weeks, depending on the location. Just take my time to recharge my own battery. Not everybody can do that, but if you can, even for a weekend, I think I strongly recommend that.
So when you go away to a location, do you always go to the same location? Where are you going and how do you recharge?
Just my personal preference. And again, I always say that one size does not fit all. So it's not, so for me, I find yoga retreat helpful. Not that I am a yoga expert, but I think environment helps me to build the energy up. That particular surrounding, because we talked about noise a lot. I think it's so much noise now. So I think my first criteria is anywhere the noise is less. Automatically. Some of the places don't even allow internet. So automatically now I'm forced to be away from my smartphone. So there are built-in process. So I don't go to the same place. I have a couple of different places that I go to, some US, some in India. And once I went to the Bahamas, actually, called Shivananda Ashram. But I think those are the criteria. Less noise, some activity. I stay away from coffee. I love coffee. But initially I thought, I'm going to die without coffee. Well, I'm not dead. I'm still alive. I didn't have coffee. The place I go to, they serve really 2 meals. When I first went many years ago, I thought I'm going to starve to death. So I carried food with me, extra packaging food. I didn't need it. I didn't need that much food. So I think what I'm trying to say is that you kind of create your own, you have to be open. You have to be open-minded. There's some discomfort in any of this thing. Anytime you do something new, there's a level of discomfort. So you have to, once you face the discomfort, I think it slowly kind of open up a new world that I think I found it absolutely, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And I agree with you, not one size fits all. This concept doesn't apply. I am with you, however, with regards to those retreats, nourishing your soul, your body, your spirits, and everything can do wonders. And it did to me. It changed my entire life to do something similar. You also mentioned your mom, and you mentioned her last time we spoke as well. And I remember you saying we had limited resources, but there was unlimited empathy. Now I'm trying to picture your mom and how she gave and how she was there for others and how she was there for the family. You are a father too. So how have you passed on some of those values, those principles to your son in particular?
It's a very good question. You cannot totally replicate, but of course, you try to instill some of those values. Couple of specific ways I have done that. I'll give you some very specific that because I remember that. When he was very young, he asked me once. He looked at me as his only mentor and role model, and I kind of stopped that. I started pointing out to various people, my friend circle, that are amazing human beings. So one of the things I've done from a very child, when he was very young, I pointed to every individual that look at their qualities and learn from them. And he was very confused at an early age because as kid, they think their parents are the most, best thing. They are the only role model. So that's a very simple one. But I started as a very young age for them to look at other people to learn. And a very clear message that I'm not perfect. I think that was a very single message I gave him when he was very young, that I'm a very imperfect human being. I have some good qualities, if you can learn from it, but don't follow the one that I'm not good at, follow others. So I think that's number one. Number two, I traveled with him I'll give you one example, which might be rather fascinating. I took him to Wyoming once to Indian reservation, the American Indian. And I remember I wanted to go and meet them, and my son wanted to come along. And it's a long story, but I will make it very short. There was a lot of reluctance from the particular place that it may not be safe. And the more I heard it, I wanted to go more because I know particularly coming from Calcutta, there's a lot of negative stories and preconceived ideas about human being, about place. So I'm very much into teaching kids, don't form your opinion based on one particular story. You got to expose yourself. You got to learn. No particular place or a human being or a religion or caste are same. Every individual is different. So we went together and we met some amazing American Indians, and it's a long story, so I will not go into the details of that. But that trip was so impactful for him. He actually made that story his college essay and went to a very good college. And what is the moral of the story was that I deliberately took him to places and met people who are not like me, who speak different language, looks different, maybe have different religion. We took a religious trip a couple of years ago when we went to synagogue, temple, church, and all kind of religious places so that we understand that these are all different faith. Yeah. They have different culture, but at the end of it, we are all the same. So I think I did a lot of those in my way to show him some of the stuff that mom showed me in her way. So.
Yeah, and I love how you are being intentional about taking him to different places, exposing him to different individuals in this world and helping him learn and be curious as well.
Absolutely.
And again, I want to build that connection to what you said earlier on. Doing good doesn't always have to be this grand gesture. It is about those small steps. And you just shared small and larger steps. So to translate this a little bit into everyday family life, I have a son too. He's only 4. And right, I talk to him about imperfections a lot as well. But we expose him through traveling. We are very fortunate to be able to travel to Asia and across Europe, and to expose him to different cultures. And he still would talk about people he met. He remembers their names and what they were like and the interactions he had. We are talking a lot about the differences and yet the essence of human beings, even though it sounds quite philosophical to have a chat about it with children. But it is about, just being kind. Those are the most important conversations we have. How to be kind. Yep. And how to say thank you, to say please, how to appreciate something, gratitude. That's what we talk about mainly.
Yep, absolutely.
And through our actions and role modeling, we can instill these values or help instill these values. How they then at some point live it, and express it, that is up to them. We can't control all of this, obviously.
No question about it. No question about it. I think that upbringing helps a lot. And I think it's extremely critical that you expose them in your own way at an early age, because kids do not follow what we say. They follow what we do.
Yes.
They follow what we do. I think it's very important to understand and remember that.
And aren't they a great mirror for us to learn?
Yep.
Neil, if I understood that correctly, you are a solo parent.
That is correct. Yes. But he's now 29 years old and an adult, full-fledged adult.
Yeah. But how has your identity as a father, as a solo parent, regardless how old they are, we still care about them, right? I want to be there for them. How has that shaped your own leadership, how you show up in the world?
It's an interesting question. Nobody ever asked me, but I will give it a shot because we're going to a different topic, but I will touch on it a little bit because I think since you raised it, I will talk about it. I am a big believer, and coming back to empathy and positivity, Ryan's mother is a good friend of mine. And that's the reason I think since you brought it up, I am, and maybe one day we'll write about it, because divorce is natural. It happened. It's going to continue to happen. But what we do with it, just like anything else, anger, negativity, pain, they're all natural things, happen to everybody. How we react to it define us. And I have evolved in many shape or form. But coming back to your question, I made it a point at a very early time that he will never hear one negative things about his mother. And I can say vice versa. So I think that shaped him also as part of this journey, right? So it's, how do you deal with it? So I think, although I was a single parent, but we raised him together in our own way. So both of us made tremendous contribution. And I think that helped him to see the positivity. I definitely think he saw empathy, a lot more empathy than negativity from his parents, irrespective of individually, we may have differences. And it's a different topic, not topic of the book. But since you mentioned, I think that was a conscious decision. You talked about deliberate. That was a very deliberate decision I made right after that happened, that our kids has nothing to do with it. How do we deal with it impacts them. And I have a responsibility to make sure that minimize the impact on the child. And I think that helped him a lot.
Yeah. And Neil, I'm bringing it up deliberately because I am surrounded by quite a few parents that have gone through separation. And I see when it works really well and sometimes when people struggle, and we can't look into the whole lives of people, obviously. So I see that with a non-judgmental view, and doing good means I'm there for them regardless, right?
The key word you use, it's an absolute key word, non-judgmental. It's music to my ears. Please continue. Yeah.
Thank you. And I say it because I think there's a lot of judgment in the world that holds us back from doing good and showing up at our best. Absolutely. And who are we to judge, right?
That's the point. Absolutely.
And to look into other people's lives.
Yep.
But to connect it again to the point that you were making, I think by focusing on, not to use your terms, dragging him into it, you create a good person, or you give him a better chance to be a good person himself. Absolutely. Because he can shape his life that's not necessarily impacted by, I'm going to use the word drama or even trauma, where there is still kindness and respect.
Yep.
And that
it's important. It is absolutely key. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, you have, as you mentioned earlier on, had quite a career path, or still have quite a career path. Different sectors, different roles, different countries that you operated in. It is fascinating. And I'm not sure if you can fully answer this question, but I am incredibly curious about how you made your career choices, how you took charge of it.
Right. I'll give it a try. I look back, and I think because of this conversation, I'm looking back more intensely and deliberately, because sometimes it happens, some of them are deliberate, sometimes it happens. But I can see there are 5 distinct phases, you can say, right? But there was two underlying link in the 5 phases. One, I would say definitely entrepreneurship was something I think it was there, and a deep desire to good in my own way. And I think there's those connection I saw in the 5 phases. And what I learned from the phases. So one of them is no question is private sector, my job in the corporate sector in the early days. And I think what I took away from there is ambition and accountability. You come from a country which don't have that much. You come to a capitalist country, and there's a beauty of, and this is a different conversation I can talk about. I coined a term much later. I call it creative capitalism or inclusive capitalism, but that's a different conversation for a different podcast. I write a lot about it. But I think the private sector taught me accountability and ambition. And then I went to entrepreneurship segment. If I can break it down, I would say entrepreneurship taught me very early on my career about failures. I failed miserably. But I also learned about the importance of taking risk and the role resilience can play in my life. And it can take hours to discuss that time, but that what happened. But it really taught me the power of resilience and how important it is in our everyday life. So that's what entrepreneurship taught me. I think the third one, I would say my time with the Australian government and others on trade and diplomacy. I think I had a much global perspective, and it really helped me to understand how, no matter how powerful a country is, if in today's age, everybody needs each other. And even the air we breathe, and we can go on the conversation. So it really allowed me to so much respect of the idea of global partners in whatever shape or capacity it might be formed. The fourth one, I would say, is to do with, I think I missed one. I talked about private sector. I talked about entrepreneurship. I talked about diplomacy, trade. And the last one will be the current stage when I'm writing a lot more and speaking a lot more. I think the idea is, how do I bring what I learned and inspire more conversations around empathy, inspire more actions about what I learned. So I think those are the 5 distinct phases. But I think if I have to, in each of the phases, I think build the next one. And I think the 3 things was common was empathy, justice, and impact. I think that was a driven factor in each of the stages.
Now, I come back to those factors, you even call them values, that are so important in a moment. However, the way you just described it sounded like, oh, it was a walk in the park. There's a new opportunity. Let's just step into it. But usually it isn't a walk in the park. Sometimes we indeed stumble into opportunities. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort, sometimes convincing. What were some of those drivers for you to make the choices to move into a different, let's call it in a general way, space? And who perhaps were also your supporters along the way?
There are many, but for the sake of time, I will point out one, because that definitely a very vivid one and an important one. I was at that time, and on the 5 I was mentioning, by the way, I missed one, the nonprofit. That was the 4th one. That I really the purpose-driven organization that. But maybe I will pick that because that's just very relevant to this conversation. I was working in a government contracting, and I had a top secret clearance from the US Defense. So you can imagine it's a very different world. And then tsunami happened, the first tsunami. And I saw that, or I heard, not on the newspaper, the death and destruction. And I started, what can I do kind of moment. And I took some time off from that company. And I started something called tsunamivictims.org. That's a website I came up with. And for your listener, this is something I always encourage everybody. Don't stop anything. I called the White House, believe me or not. And they picked up. I don't think they'll do that anymore, but they picked up the phone. And I connected this tsunamivictim.org with the White House Fund. I connected with the Red Cross. It was just a small time. I took 2 weeks off. I did something. It was done. I go back to my job. But coming back to your question very specifically, that feeling really kind of was boiling in me that it was such a wonderful feeling. And I just started a company right after that. And I stayed with it for a year, but the calling was so hard, I left and I joined a nonprofit. It was not something I had a degree, no experience. I applied for a job from a newspaper, believe me or not, Washington Post. The Dutch was hiring somebody in DC, and I just applied because the calling was so hard, and I felt this is my calling and I'm going to give it a try. And I got the job. I mean, there are many stories like that, but that is a particular one because that shift from a private sector, particularly after I started a company, I left. My partner was rather confused that I started something and why am I going to leave? I couldn't properly explain. And maybe one of the best decisions I made, because 17 years after that, opened my eyes to an extent, and I understood the value what a purpose-driven organization can do. I'm not saying they're all perfect. I'm not saying they don't need better governance. I'm not saying there are no wastage. And I know there's a lot of news around that right now. But I will tell you, after spending so much time and visiting these projects, not just sitting in Washington and talking to them. I went to projects in Dhaka, to Ethiopia, to South Sudan. I've seen the power of the purpose-driven organization, which is the so-called the third sector. So I think that's the answer I will give you for this conversation, that you never know. I never knew it's going to come. It came to me and I acted upon it. And I have no regrets.
And you felt it really strongly. There was a huge urge, right?
There was a huge urge. And also I was saying that I don't know this sector, and this is maybe for your listener. There's certain skill we pick up, no matter what we do. And I'm always talking about this skill set, that of course there are some industry-specific skill, some hard skill that we have to learn for a specific job. But I am never going to downplay some people call it soft skill. I call it life skill. That is equally important. And those skills allowed me to carry on in so many different sectors. Yes, I have to learn new hard skill. No, I'm not undermining those. And sometimes it was very hard and frustrating because you're a new kid on a sector that nobody knows you. Yeah. Because they have been doing this for 30 years and this guy shows up, and it takes a lot to earn respect. I'm not undermining that, but I am focusing on the life skill that is equally important, and pay attention to those.
Yes,
one thing you cannot fake, if I just finish that thought, many people told me, you cannot fake authenticity. You cannot fake many things. You can't really fake authenticity for too long. I think if you are authentic, no matter what you're doing, it will come across. And I have seen it again and again. That took me a lot more than my knowledge about how to define a particular problem in a way they have defined it. Sorry, Cathleen. I just wanted to say that.
And don't be sorry about it, because it's such an important point. Yeah. And many people speak to me about, don't be too authentic in my past. I'm like, how can I be too authentic? And I wrote about authenticity versus oversharing and where the difference lies. But authenticity is key, and masking is just taking far too much energy and doesn't build connection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I am with you there.
Okay.
I loved what you said about, I felt it so strongly. I had to literally move, and I felt it with you. Now, not everybody might be, and I say it again, tuned into themselves so strongly, or have this urge, this feeling of, I've got to follow this. And that's what you actually wrote. The purpose whispers to you, and you've got to tune into your purpose. Now, if you were to give advice to somebody who's currently at a crossroad, not quite knowing what to do next, and they haven't tuned into their values as you have, their purpose as you have, what's one key piece of advice perhaps you would give them to make sure, they make a choice that works for them?
I'm pausing. This is, I think maybe some of them sound repetitive. Maybe because, when you asked me about only my career journey, and I talked about all these different stages and, different things, I do remember vividly that, and this is something without any doubt, that in this journey, there was a couple of driving factors. And one of them was definitely, it allowed me to grow. And I use a word called reinvention. And when I say reinvention, Cathleen, I'm not talking, I don't want to be somebody else. I talk about reinvention. I want to be a better version of myself. Mm-hmm. And that's what I meant. That's kind of always drives me, every day drives me, a better version of myself, whatever that means, right? So I think this one thing is, you asked me, it's a tough one to answer. I mean, because I'm always this hungry that what is a better version of myself? I find small things to do that is not in anybody's scale, this will be just a small gesture. And another thing I will say, I always say that sometimes philanthropy is also selfish because we feel good about doing things for others. And I talk about, I'll give you one story, not to distract this conversation, but something came to my mind. I think the Chinese wisdom, old saying that says, if you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. If you want to be happy for a month, win a lottery or something like that. But if you want to be happy for a lifetime, help someone. That stuck in my head. So I'm doing it for most, so there's a selfish reason of happiness or loneliness or sadness, whatever we want to define, whatever we are in a position. So I find if I look at it from that perspective also, that for being a happy life, helping somebody makes me actually happy. It's much easier. So I'm doing it for myself instead of thinking I'm doing something good for the world. Maybe I'm just doing it for myself.
And I have this urge to pause here for a moment and to give some space to the listeners to take that in and to perhaps reflect upon a situation where you helped somebody, where you took action to do something good and helpful in the moment, and remember how it felt.
Absolutely.
And I just had goosebumps when you talked about it because, yes, that's the experience that you're getting. And it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. So, and there's nothing wrong in that. It's nothing wrong in feeling good. And I think sometimes I love this story about 1 hour to a lifetime because I feel it. I feel it in every bone. I'm feeling it from a very young age. And I don't think I realized that time, when I saw in my own little way, whatever my parents did and I did, I felt good about it. Mm. And I still do.
In many of the stories you are sharing, I recognize some resourcefulness. So just to step back into that story about the tsunami, the first tsunami, and you setting up the website. Now, that means I immediately think about what can I do? I take action, small or large, and I do something. And that requires, from my perspective, initiative, drive, but also resourcefulness to know, okay, who could help me with this? What can we do? What's actually possible? And now I'm throwing out a very generalistic assumption that there are people in the world who would stop themselves pretty quickly because I don't know how that works. I really don't have time for this. Or, I'm not getting involved for whatever psychological reasons, right? Now, that doesn't seem to be the case with you. If so, have you ever experienced a situation where you kind of started to talk yourself out of it? So what were those drivers? And here's the third part of the question. What can people do who do stop themselves to turn that story around?
I'm so glad you asked this question, Cathleen, for multiple reasons. One is I will first address the word of resourcefulness, and I will then come to the second point. Mm. I don't think everybody can do everything. We all have our limitation. But let's talk about that for somebody who can, and then I will come to the other group of people. So yes, I think I started organizing cultural program when I was 14 years old in my neighborhood in Calcutta, actually 14 or 15. And I would raise money for an organization called Deaf and Dumb. It's not a nice word, but that's the way they explain, Deaf and Dumb Society of Calcutta. People cannot hear, people cannot see. So I would organize this event when I was 15, and whatever profit we had, we gave it to the Deaf and Dumb Society of Calcutta or India. It started in the neighborhood. We did it in an auditorium kind of a place. And then we went to the main auditorium in Calcutta in a matter of five years. And I raised money. And I have those brochures now where people give advertisement, as you call now, of course, the same model that Yahoo and everybody has, advertisement model. Why I'm sharing this? Yes, that is resourcefulness. Because, of course, I think by nature, I always was able to talk to somebody that, look, we're going to do this cultural program. Yes, you will listen to music. We'll make some profit, and the profit goes to this. So that is resourcefulness. I understand that. And of course, I still continue doing that I still do these events even now. But so I do encourage people to find their own network. And you'll be amazed. You will be amazed, Catherine. There are people with web skill, people with writing skills, people with accounting skill, people with legal skill. They're there. If you explain to them what's your purpose and connect their purpose with your purpose, then it's 2 plus 2 is no longer 4. 2 plus 2 can be 8 or 10. So I'm still in this resourcefulness box. And we can talk more about that. There's a way to do that, and happy to talk hours on that. I live on that whole idea because there are people around you. I'm no special. I'm absolutely no special. There are equally special people around me, but I know how to talk to them so they become excited about the same journey and bringing people in the same journey. Okay, now come out of the resourcefulness box. Not everybody can and have the time, or everybody's different. And that's where we started the conversation about the resource part of the book, which is not getting a lot of attention, but I'm speaking about it with you and others. I took a lot of time to vet organization. In US, we have this 2 or 3 agencies. They measure nonprofit in terms of their transparency, in terms of their credibility, and they give them star marks. So one of the things I've done in the book, and it took quite a bit of time, list a lot of organizations at the end of each chapter. So people, you mentioned one group that, they don't have, actually people are very busy, and we have the luxury in a weekday I'm talking to you. So we do have time to dedicate to this purpose. Yeah. A lot of people don't have that. They are, job, family, people have many issues these days and everywhere, but still they want to do good. So coming back to that part of the conversation, one of the things I will request people to look at the book on the resource side of it and use it, even if you don't read the whole book, because each chapter is different. You don't have to read chapter 1 and chapter 5. You can read one chapter if one particular person, John Glenn, the astronaut, interests you. But there are resources each chapter that someone who doesn't have the time can go and join an organization, volunteer an organization, find those resources in the book.
And again, you don't just highlight organizations, you highlight with the stories some even simpler steps. I'm not saying joining organizations necessarily difficult.
Right.
But, those everyday smaller steps are important. So instead of being the person who drives an initiative forward, you may be the one who says, how can I help in smaller amounts?
That's it. Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have neighbors, and those neighbors have been fascinating for me. And I thought I'm going to share this mini story with you. Why have they been fascinating? Because I've been watching them, observing them, getting into great conversations with them over the last few years. And I kept wondering, why are they always so upbeat, so happy? And why? That gives it already a negative connotation. How come? What are they doing? And what are they doing is they learn from their lives. They are now in their 60s, both. They learn from their lives about what gives them happiness, content, a sense of togetherness with others, and what they don't accept in their lives anymore. But what they do on a daily basis is they help. We sometimes call them lovingly the kindergarten, because sometimes if kindergartens or schools closes or there's anything there, like, send them over to us. We have a bit of playtime, right? Or they simply say, oh, you look a bit tired today. Everything okay? Or, come over, the coffee is still hot. Let's have a chat. And they just do it without expecting anything from it. It's exactly what you mentioned earlier on. It makes them feel good. They love it. And what they have done is in this neighborhood to create a community. So step by step, this kindness is being shared, is being passed on. It's being, to come back to your point, 2 + 2 is not 4. It's being multiplied.
I can share one story that will expand what you just said. When my son was very young, I told him many things, but one of them I know for sure, that Ryan, when you do something for somebody, don't expect anything. And he was very confused at that age. I see it doesn't happen that way. Don't expect person X to go back to you because you have done something for person X or person Y. Fast forward 2 years ago, he was with AstraZeneca. It's a British company. He called me. He said, Dad, something strange happened today at work. I said, what happened? One of the bosses, big bosses, this is not his immediate boss, somehow heard Ryan is going to Ireland. And he met him on the corridor. He said, Ryan, come to my office. And Ryan was nervous because he's a very high position person. And he gave his keys to Ryan. He said, hey, I have an apartment in Ireland, which is empty. Why don't you go and stay there? And Ryan was so confused. So we had this nice chat. I said, Ryan, remember we talked about almost 15, 20 years ago? This guy has nothing to do with you. You haven't done anything for him. So anyway, I thought I would share the story. So it's always a cycle. You never know. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't expect anything. It will come back to you. It will come back to you in some shape or form.
Did he stay at the apartment?
Oh, he did. He brought then he gave him a gift of something he brought from Ireland, some wine or something. So he did. Yeah.
Well, hopefully no wine, but maybe something else.
Something
nice
else,
Guinness also.
something. But yeah, it really, I kind of reminded me what I told him, and it was just a wonderful, there are many stories like that, but that just kept fresh in my mind. So
yeah. And I deliberately keep coming back to some of those stories with you to really help people see those everyday actions we can all take that won't take a lot of time.
I'll give you one more to think about, because neighbor is a very interesting word, and I think it's changing in America. I cannot speak for all it changes from neighbor to neighbor. We grew up in a place where we knew our neighbor. And I know in this case, a lot of people don't know. I know friends who live next to each other, don't know them. I make it a point, not always successfully, I have to admit, to go and knock the door and say hello. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying everybody reciprocate. I understand that. So you have to take that discomfort. We talked about discomfort a lot. So don't expect everybody will reciprocate. And if that makes you nervous, then we are again giving into the word we used earlier is reactiveness. And I refuse to live in a reactive way. So I knock the door and some of them respond, some of them don't. But that's the journey we have to take. And I'll give you one example of my last house. There was a gentleman next to my house. He knew I had a back problem. I haven't done anything for him, zero, except I had a basketball hoop, which I lowered for his kid. And one day there was a huge snowstorm. I heard a noise and I peeped on my window. Actually, I came back from Holland that night, and I saw he was cleaning my driveway. Again, I can go on these stories again and again. I wrote an article at Huffington Post almost 10 years ago. This is very much to this country, but I think it applies to every country. The name of the article was The Secret of America's Success. And I argued that at that time, there was a research done by a large research organization about what is the secret of America's success. People talked about, they asked Americans, of course, they talked about hard work, they talked about honesty, they talked about, financial structure, defense, immigrants. In that article, I shared a lot of story, including the story I just shared with you. There are many. I think it's empathy. And we have to find a way to ignite that empathy. We have to find the right conversation. We have to go step a little bit towards you. Yeah. To ignite that thing out of you.
And I know and understand we play a little bit of ping pong adding to those stories. It doesn't require too much.
It doesn't.
So all the stories you've just shared, and a few came up for me as well while listening to you, they do require what you just said, to take this additional step. But that's a moment. So, for example, clearing the driveway, it won't, well, depending on the driveway, it won't take me hours, but maybe it's a really large one, could be a difference. But if I do it anyway, why not adding a little bit more, right? And do something good. If I was in the morning in a coffee shop and somebody just held loads of coffee cups and you could see she struggled to get the door open, that didn't take much to open the door and to step to the side and to keep it open until she was out there, and maybe to offer, do you need a hand to bring it to the car? There wasn't anything to it. It took 1 minute, if even.
And if I turn that to a leadership conversation, because if your listener are in, and I'm going to always turn this conversation to some selfish part, because I feel that way we feel we are also helping us. Mm-hmm. So we talked about the other story about giving and happiness.
Yeah.
In the corporate world, where I spend a lot of time, significant of my time in the business sector, as in a leadership position, I can tell you now very clearly that when you engage with empathy with your staff, you get more back. There are evidence after evidence. So you're also, if you take the same tools and technique or whatever we want to phrase them, apply in our corporate life, that we listen better, we build bridges, and we show empathy. There are many research has shown that you get a lot more from your employees than anything else. Paychecks helps. I'm not igniting that, of course, paycheck definitely helps, but there's a lot of articles about it. I have written recently also at CEO World that when you show humility, when you show courage, and you show empathy, employees react very positively.
Yeah. And speaking about leadership, who is a leader? And you worked with many, many different people, including presidents, activists, entrepreneurs. Who's a leader who really inspired you, and why?
Right. That brings back to a point, and I would like to do more of it. I haven't done. In the book, there are a lot of so-called well-known individuals, right? They're from all sectors. They're a basketball player to astronaut to president and movie stars. But I am now in a journey to find people, and there are some in the book. And coming back to your answer your question, there is a gentleman who lives not too far from where I live. There are 3 people more, but one of them lives in Virginia, Muhammad Asri, and these 3 individuals I'm mentioning. They are different religion, different background, but they all are in the book. There's a lady, Tacey San Martin. She lives in Washington, D.C., and Ashok Motai, who lives in Maryland, the same state I am in. So now answering your question, I will mention his name because I was able to observe him up and close more than anybody else in the book, because this is somebody I work with. This is somebody, part of my business life. And I've seen his leadership style, what I just talked about, in terms of empathy, in terms of humility, in terms of courage. I have seen it in action for almost 25, 30 years. And I have to say that definitely, there are other people I have seen also the same thing, but I will say his name because I observed in action how the 3 things we talked about actually give results.
Now, I kind of want to delve into a story there, how it shows. You mentioned earlier on active listening. Well, active listening, you see the presence of somebody, right? You hear their questions perhaps as well. But I wonder if you have a story from all these years available to describe how it showed up in their day-to-day. What did you see, notice, and observe?
One comes to mind immediately is whenever I can speak from personal experience, whenever I went to this individual with an idea, some of them may not be very good idea. I have seen they have taken the time to listen. And you can see, we talked about you cannot fake authenticity. And this is a classic example. I knew he was listening intensely, deliberately. And that to me, it's a combination of a lot of things we talked about: showing up, empathy, listening, caring, and then giving you feedback that it may or may not be the best idea, but making sure that the feedback is constructive in a way that when you're receiving it, you leave the room, even if you realize this is maybe the worst idea I come up with, you don't leave the discussion feeling down. You leave the discussion feeling energized to come up with another idea. And that's the difference. That's a huge difference. You leave a conversation putting somebody down, or you leave a conversation energizing somebody. I'm a big believer of positive vibe. I'm a huge believer of positive vibe. And I make it a mission. And my mother used to say, if you have nothing good to say, don't say anything. And I just got into my head, if I have nothing good to say, well, just let it better be quiet. So if I take the same analogy, if I cannot do good, at least don't do harm. I mean, I can, there are many ways to say that, but yeah, so.
Oh, your mom sounds absolutely marvelous, I have to say.
Because this is stuck in my mind. There's a picture of her, so she reminds me all the time. If nothing good to say, just be quiet. Anyway.
Well, now I know. Every time I talk to you, you're going to be quiet. Let's see. And you mentioned, you have different personalities, stories demonstrated in your book. I mean, right. I don't know anybody whose forward stems from the Dalai Lama, who shares a story about Mother Teresa and meeting her, who has received a testimonial by Bill Clinton. There are big names in here. And what I have to say is I absolutely admire, and I know I'm not alone with this, that you brought stories from every way of life, from different people, sharing different stories of how to do good and stories that really, really inspired you. That's the moment when you are going quiet. There's a question connected to this.
Go ahead.
And the question is, I'm pretty sure that throughout your life so far, you have met hundreds, if not even thousands of people who inspired you and who've done something good.
Oh, absolutely.
How did you come up with this selection in your book?
Right. I think a little while ago, I did mention, I'm going to go back to what I said. I think when I thought about, the first question you asked me why I wrote the book, I was trying to explain, my childhood and, and the question I faced. And obviously, you grab onto things. There are a couple of criteria was in my head. One, except two, I wanted to make sure that I have some connection with these people. Some are more, longer connections, some are less. So that's one criteria. I wanted to make sure this is a variety of individuals that are not in one particular, not just business leaders or a nonprofit leaders or a political leaders. So that's another criteria. And I did pick a lot of people which I felt people would be curious to know, who is Kevin Bacon other than a movie star. It just so happened he helped in one of the projects when I was with the CEO of SOS Children Villages. So I think I use those criteria that people will be curious to know. It's a little bit easier, and I have to say this, to start with a journey with some people that are known. And I deliberately told you a little while ago, I'm now moving to stories of people that are less known. So this is where I want to go with it. Everyday average people doing amazing things. But I thought it would be a good point to start with people that people are usually curious about. So it would be easier for me to reach them with these stories. And once you start a journey, then you bring others in the journey. And I think those are the criteria I used in the early part of my journey, that people I worked with. And I also looked at the audience perspective, that who am I telling the story? Will there be any interest to learn a little bit about what can I learn from His Holiness, in a simple way, in a 2,000 words. And I kind of, that was what went through my mind.
Yeah, which is beautiful. And there were stories that I have never known about. Big fan of Kevin Bacon, for example. I'm like, didn't realize this, Yeah. So really beautifully done.
Thank you.
Now, again, you have been working in very different places with their very different personality stakeholders that had to be influenced. And I wonder how it has been for you to not only speak up, but to challenge authorities. Because in order to do good on a larger scale and to truly influence, you may sometimes have to speak up about even some of the difficult topics and not remain silent. So, what recommendations would you give to somebody who really wants to achieve something greater for this world, but doesn't quite feel confident enough to challenge existing norms?
Yeah, this is a tough one, and I'm going to have tough time answering it, but I will do my best because we talked about authenticity, so I cannot not answer it now. Tough one in the sense for multiple reasons. One, I think I have challenged, sometime not successfully, and I had to pay the price in many different shape or form. And that's the reason I'm speaking slowly, because then the question is, am I going to recommend the same thing to somebody else? Because the price was a little too harsh for me for multiple reasons. But I did make it a point all my life to speak up as much as I can in a way. I think that's the time you discuss not what you say, but how you say it. Well, not what you do, but how you do it. That's what. But I have spoken up. So that's number one. And I also mentioned right now that sometimes the consequence, I have to face the consequence, which was not very pleasant. The second part, I also could not speak up. And that is not a good feeling inside, because when you are in a position of NGO head trying to depend on the donor, because that's your lifeblood, you have to be very careful what you can and cannot say. So a lot of time I was not able to say what I really feel. And that makes me less authentic at certain times, because here I am talking about authenticity, but at the same time, I'm controlling myself many times that I would have said if I have nothing at stake. So it's I kind of share two very diverse conversations. I have spoken up, but there are times I could not speak up because, for the reason I mentioned, we are dependent on donors, and the donors come from all shape and form. And then I am jeopardizing the organization, the staff, and the program, which I felt responsible for. So I couldn't speak up.
Did you have an outlet in this moment or afterwards just to release the tension? And I might be exaggerating this point right now. Let me give you a little bit more context. When I am in a moment of I can't really share authentically how I'm feeling, or challenge or question that may be difficult for the recipient to receive, and I start to hold back, I'm noticing an inner discomfort. Something doesn't quite sit right. And I need an outlet in this moment just to balance myself back out. And it might go back to taking a walk or doing something for yourself. But how can you ensure that you stay true to your value to yourself?
I will tell you what I'm doing now. Maybe that's, and then I will try to think about past. What I'm doing now, a lot of things happening around me, around you, that is troubling me quite a bit, right? Not much I can do. Whether it's a political issue, whether it's a war, whether it's hunger, all kind of stuff. So one option is I start writing about it on my social media that I'm against it or I'm for it, in whatever way I express myself. We all have a way to express our feeling, whether verbally or in writing or in a shape or form. So what I'm trying to do is channel the energy in a way which is very specific. And coming back to the book again, I wanted people to act upon it. I'll give you a very simple example. So I mentioned many times in this conversation that I provided resources. My journey now is all about igniting conversation. My journey now is all about uniting people. I may not agree with you politically. I may not agree with what you believe in. I may have severe differences, what you have in mind and I have mine. But I refuse to accept that just because I do not agree with somebody, that person is evil. I refuse to accept that. So I have channeling my energy now in this specific journey, and I'll be more specific because this is vague conversations to some extent. I'm actually joining organizations called Listen First, Braver Angels, Us United, and others. They are grassroots US organizations. And some of them actually joined my book launch because I reached out to them lately. And they are doing on their own way to bring America together. I know it sounds very, idealistic conversation, but they're doing it at a grassroots level. One of them is forming sheriff police sheriff network, so that average Americans can come together and have a coffee at a book club, at a church, at a synagogue. Everybody have a different model. So coming back to your question, that's what I'm channeling my energy to see what can I do. I cannot solve the big issues, but I can. I have a platform now that allows me to participate in some shape or form. I'll give you one more example, which is from the book. There's an app called 5 Calls, number 5 Calls, CLLS. You can be, let's say you're pro-gun or anti-gun. Let's say you're pro-choice or pro-life, whatever your position is. Everybody have a position. That is not my calling. My calling is what the 5 Calls does. If you press that app, it informs 5 of your legislature, congressmen and women, inform them rapidly where you stand on an issue. So I'm encouraging citizens to be an engaged citizen. Democracy is messy. It is slow. It is troubling. But this is the only form of government that takes care of people like Cathleen and Neil, right? So I'm a big believer in democratic society. So I am channeling my energy and resources and time in igniting this conversation, helping people to take action. I don't know whether I answered your question or not, but that's where I'm kind of channeling my time and energy.
Yeah, to a large extent, you answered it 100%. It isn't. So what I also understood is it isn't about focusing too much on the energy that I might have given up in this moment when making the decision of not to challenge something, not to ask a difficult question. It's about focusing on where I can
what I can do. So I think this is an important point for all of you listeners. I think it's, we have limited time in this world and limited resources. And I am absolutely passionate about how am I using my time and my little energy I have and the little time I have in this world. So this is kind of my message to all of you, or everybody listening, that use that precious time we have in able to do whatever you're capable of doing. Because if I'm just using a lot of my time getting angry and getting upset and getting frustrated, that is not helping any cause I believe in. So how do I channel that anger to purpose? How do I channel my anger to purpose? How do I channel my purpose to action?
And now we go full circle back. You remember at the beginning when we talked about the news and maybe not watching the news so often? Mm-hmm. Please pay attention. That's a message for the listeners as well, to all the good that's already happening around you. And all the good that the news are not talking about, because they're not always newsworthy, right? We're being more fascinated by the evil stuff happening, by the negative news. And it is important to keep a close eye out for those moments of smiles, of kindness, of support, of offering help, of people really trying to do something greater and that genuinely and authentically in this world.
And I'll give you that news from yesterday. Somebody told me, I didn't know. I walked into the office, somebody said, Neil, are you behind this? I said, behind what? I'm not behind this story that happened. There's a gentleman in Washington. He's still an anonymous because they found him. They're not going to give his name out. He put up 2,000 signs across Washington, D.C. All he says, empathy. Talking about story, positive story. I was jumping in joy, although I have nothing to do with this. And my colleague thought I'm behind this, which I'm not. But hey, it's a good story.
It's a great story. It's a great story. I can imagine you would have thought, how did I not come up with this?
I mean, somebody doing it is just fine with me. That's the whole idea, right? Yes. It's the whole idea. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And as we are approaching the end of this incredible conversation, I could listen to you literally forever. What's one insight you hope that every listener carries with them after hearing this show?
I think we'll have to coming back to full circle. I think if you remember the framework I talked about, gems, even if you don't remember all the gems, just one of them, is start small. Because I think that's the part most of us feel very overwhelmed. Anything too much overwhelm us. I think pick something that close to your heart and take an action about that. That's it.
Thank you so much. Neil, we will be publishing the links to the book, all your social media posts in the show notes, social media accounts in the show notes as well. However, how can people connect with you best?
I think the website is definitely the best way. It's my name. So it's Neil Ghosh, NEILGHOSH.org. And my email is there. So I'll be happy to connect with anyone in the same journey.
And from the stories I've heard, Neil is connecting and is actively listening and reading. So get in touch with Neil. It's been a tremendous pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm going to leave today with a lot of energy and ideas and thoughts. And my question to the listeners is, what are you leaving this conversation with? What's one small step that you are willing and actually really inspired to take, perhaps right away? Let us know. I want to be inspired by you too. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day and remaining week. Bye-bye, and speak to you very, very soon.
Thank you.